everyone. Welcome to another Hacking HR discussion. It's so great to have you here on a Monday morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you've been in your Monday so far. It is snowing outside my window, so I'm hoping that maybe you're in a slightly warmer environment. Please feel free to put where you are in the chat so we can see where people are joining us from around the world. We have a really great discussion that we're having today. We're going to be talking about building an inclusive and positive work environment that promotes psychological safety and belonging. But I'm not going to be the one giving you all the deets on that. We're going to have a great panel. And Jessa, if you could bring them on screen now, that'd be really lovely. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you. I hope you're having a good day. I think the first thing that is always great to be able to kick off these things is to get to know the people on the screen. And so we're going to do a little round here of just introductions. I'll go clockwise as it is, and then we'll have a free-for-all when it comes time for the discussion itself. So if you could just give me or the audience your name, a little bit about yourself, and then if you could answer the question, what does an inclusive and positive work environment look like for you in your own words? So if we could start, Kim, if you want to kick us off in that.
Yeah, sure. So hi, thank you for having me. My name is Kim Lee, head of talent management at Latera. And inclusive environment, what it means to me, is an opportunity for all of the diversity of thought and all the different backgrounds that people have are welcomed and feel part of the community and part of the organization, helping to drive initiatives and change and things like that.
Thanks, Kim. Alenda, do you want to go next? Do I have your name right? Am I pronouncing that right? Alenda? No, I think we might be a little internet slow there. Oh, maybe we'll skip Alenda for a second here, and we'll move on to, is it Lane or Laney?
It's Lane. Hi, everybody. I'm Lane Watson, calling in from Atlanta, so it is a little bit warmer here. Glad to be here. When I think about an inclusive work environment, I think it's one where people can be their true authentic selves and where they really feel trusted and feel like they can build strong relationships based on that mutual trust.
Thanks, Lane. And Richard, do you want to finish us off here? I think we may have lost Alenda for a moment, but hopefully she can get back on here.
Sure, absolutely. Richard Hinton here from Assembly OSM. I'm calling from New York City, so it's pretty cold out there. I have my heat on, but we don't have snow, so I'm actually thankful for that. An inclusive work environment to me is a work environment where folks can feel free to bring as much as they feel they can of their authentic self to work every day. Being able to share different ideas, share who they are, what makes them tick each day, but really being able to do that in a welcomed environment.
Great. Thanks so much. That's awesome. We're just at 3 right now. Hopefully Alenda can get back with us, but I still think we're going to have an awesome conversation around this. And I think the great thing about this is that we're going to kind of get into the meat of what it takes to build this type of environment. So if we, maybe we get, Alenda, are you there? Do we have you back? Alenda? Okay, why don't we just get on with the first question? Oh, there, are you back, Alenda?
Yes, I'm back. Goodness, I couldn't get off mute before.
Do you want to do your intro for us so we know who you are?
Yeah, sorry about that. Hello, everyone. My name is Alenda Durr, and I lead DE&I for US Cellular. When you asked about what would be the work environment that to me would be representative of inclusion, I honestly think that there's necessarily a need for trust. There's a need for the enterprise to show that they care about their people. And when you have that, people are able to lean more into what the mission and vision and values are because they feel that they matter. So it's really important to me that the trust is there and that the company shows that they care.
Yeah, I love that. And it's such a central point, that trust. And I think that's where we get into the psychological safety side of things. It's such an integral component of psychological safety that there is that trust between the team, with the team and the leader, and with the team and leader and the organization as a whole. So with that being said, how can managers and leaders foster psychological safety within their teams? How can they go about promoting that? And this is a free for all now, so I'm just going to let you unmute as you will.
I'll take a stab at that one. I think they need to build individual relationships. I mean, we all said trust is the foundation. Well, how do you do that? You really get to know your people. You get to know them and who they are. You get to know their strengths. You get to know the things that they maybe want to work on, and you get to know them a little bit personally, something about their family or what they like to do on the weekend. And I think by establishing that relationship, you build that trust. I think also as leaders, they can show a little bit of vulnerability and talk about something that maybe they're concerned about, or a time when they made a mistake and what they learned from it. And then that helps the employees feel like they can talk about those things as well. And then another thing I just thought of is having some sessions, maybe either at the end of a team meeting or maybe every once in a while, just listening, asking questions, and doing less of the talking and more of the listening, asking the team what's going well, what should we be working on, what can I do better to support you. I think things like that will go a long way to helping the employees feel like their voices can be heard.
And to tag
I
on to
totally
that,
agree with what you're saying, Lane.
Oh. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's really important also when it comes to the vulnerability piece, that you lean into those difficult questions about what's happening in the world, about what's happening in the workplace, about what's happening with the teams, because we're all in a really hard space in HR right now, given the economy and the social and political conditions that we're operating through. We really do need to make sure that we're creating that safe space for our employees to have those difficult conversations, and maybe even creating platforms where they can have those conversations with one another. That's one of the things that, deals with the community piece of it. So that psychological safety is created when you're building that community.
What I was going to say is to tag on to kind of both of that is giving people the opportunity to share. So one thing that we have on some of the teams that I lead is a check-in. We do, and it's through Mentimeter, and people check in. So I don't necessarily see who's feeling what, but we have the opportunity to share how we're feeling about the week, how, as well as priorities and things like that, and have a dialogue. And the person who, if they say they're stressed, they have the opportunity to speak up if they want. And if not, that's fine, but we're all so we have that sense of community and as we're working through things together. Also, trying to make sure that everyone has that voice. It's easy for us introverts to kind of hide in the background and not speak up. You might have great things to say, but we sometimes need to process and things like that. So making sure that there's that opportunity as well to bring in those of us that are more on the introverted or quiet side. And so that they have a voice as well.
Yeah, if I could tag on to that as well too, I agree with everything that everyone said as well. A couple of things that I also think are important is to set the tone a little bit too with your team, and it could be at an individual basis. It could also be during a one-on-one or something like that. But just letting them know, being transparent. I want to make sure that we're fostering an inclusive kind of environment. I want to make sure that you feel you have psychological safety. We have that relationship with one another. I think having that transparency also kind of aids in kind of gaining that trust and really setting the tone for cultivating that relationship that you need. Another thing that I think is also important in really setting the tone is modeling that behavior. So being it, be it with your other peers, with leadership, with other teammates. The more that you can show folks the behaviors so that it's not just performative, I think the more folks are going to adopt that and also practice it as well and start modeling it so that it actually cultivates.
Yeah, I really love that, Richard. I love the idea of role modeling, especially from a leadership position, because the eyes are on the leader most of the time. They're the ones that people are looking to. So whether it comes down to their behaviors, their actions, or even their emotions, which can spread throughout a team and create that culture of either one of, like joy and compassion or fear or anger or whatever that might involve within that. And I like that you're all giving people examples of things that they can use to start building in those check-ins. I love, Kim, the idea of making sure that the check-in is available for every personality type. So we're thinking of, our introverts and our extroverts, or people that might be a little quieter. I like the idea that we started talking about behaviors and actions and the vulnerability things. Are there things that, and I don't want to just think about leaders themselves, but leaders and also team members, are there specific behaviors and actions that people can be doing that help promote that inclusion and that psychological safety? So if we get down to more of the specifics, they can be leaders or they can be team members themselves. What are some of the things that people, beyond what we talked a little bit about that vulnerability, but people can be doing in order to help create this?
I think one thing that helps, at least in, I'm more on the meeting side, I'm thinking more the broader, is, I agree as far as getting to know your team. One thing that I found that is helpful is when possible, providing an agenda, or at least understanding what the flow of the meeting will be. And that gives the people, again, like me, who need to process, the opportunity to kind of think about what I'm going to bring to the meeting, and prepare for that. Another thing that we have talked through at where I'm at now is the 6-second rule. So giving 6 seconds of quiet or silence for people to process and have that opportunity to speak up, because it's really that awkward silence. Everyone, someone wants to fill it. So giving that opportunity. So, I speak for the introverts.
I think one thing we can do is encourage our team members to get to know the people who aren't just exactly like them, right? It's so easy to surround yourself with your circle of friends that, look and act and talk just like you. But if we encourage people to, create a broader range of your trusted circle, really try to seek out differences so that you can learn and grow, and they can add ideas that you may not have thought of. And it doesn't have to be just getting involved in inclusion and diversity efforts. I mean, that certainly is helpful, but just, the people that you surround yourself with, that you're on calls with, take some time just to set up a quick 15-minute one-on-one to get to know them. And then when we do think about the I&D efforts, one of the things that we did at my last company with the employee resource groups was encourage people to join the employee resource group that they knew the least amount about, or that made them the most uncomfortable, because that's really where you're going to have that opportunity to learn and grow. And you will surprise yourself at, how much you become an ally, even though it was something that really, made you uncomfortable when you first went in.
Yeah, I love that. I also feel just simply listening, humbly listening to folks, really making sure that you have that safe space, like Alenda had kind of mentioned as well. But I think a lot of times, we have these conversations, we have these relationships, but are we truly listening? Are we being humble and, hearing what folks are saying before we're just responding to what other people are saying too? So everything that, Lainey said too, I think just adding, truly making sure that you're listening to the other person or people and ensuring that you have that safe space is important as well.
I hear you talking about coaching behaviors. And a lot of I'm sorry, Kim, that keeps happening. I'm so sorry. There's a lag on my end too. So I hope that's not, I'm so sorry that's happening. Go ahead.
All good. Go ahead. I already spoke.
Okay. I was saying all that I'm hearing you say are really good coaching behaviors. And as a leader, I don't think we often think about the need to be a coach to our people, to encourage them, you know, to lean through, the lean into need to do to help them see things from a different lens, more so than always being that manager who's trying to lead them. Also making sure that we are underpinning their development by coaching, by listening, recommending things that we know could be supportive of them, like joining a employee resource group, and just really getting to understand what they are wanting to get out of the experience of the position that they're in. Because sometimes if you're not having those conversations and coaching them to something different or better, or to help challenge them, you will not create that psychological safety, because again, it goes back to whether or not you're showing that you care about them. So I love that we're talking about coaching behaviors, because quite honestly, it's needed.
Kim, did you want to add on something there?
Oh, no, I was just, as far as the importance of getting to know your team, what motivates them, and what's going on with them. And I call it the background. We all show up, especially these days, with so much of the virtual. You see this much of my world, and you might see my cat running around. But there's a whole life that goes on behind us, and understanding some of that is can help you understand how to connect with the person, and what might be driving some of their maybe change in how they show up to meetings as well. So I think that's really important to get to know and take that time. I think is really important.
I think we'd all like to see your cat if they happen to be around later. But I love that. I love that there's such useful things that people can implement immediately, like that 6-second rule. I don't know if anybody's actually counted out 6 seconds in their head. It feels like an eternity, especially when you're on a video call, to actually pause for 6 seconds, not to be confused with the 5-second rule. I mean, you can pick food up off the floor in 5 seconds, but once it hits 6, no more touching it. But such hands-on things that people can start implementing. And I like, Alenda, that you started talking about the elements of leaders being coaches. And I think that's something that we're seeing as being more and more necessary. But I think that many leaders struggle with developing those skills. So are there ways or tactics or training and development opportunities where we can influence and educate leaders and leadership on not only the impact of a positive work environment, because sometimes it is convincing people that, hey, you actually do need people that are happy and engaged with their work, but also the skills that they can use to build that type of environment. So training and development opportunities. So what are ways that we can start creating those type of leader coaches within organizations?
Is that 6
I'll
seconds?
say
I'm
that
trying
I
not
think
to.
I know
number,
it's hard, right? Super hard.
I don't like the silence. I can't help it. One of the things that I've done in the past is give managers just quick tools of how to do this. So leading questions, some example questions, like if you're going to have a get to know you conversation, here are some questions you can ask. If you are going to have a feedback session, here are some questions you can ask. If you're going to have a, if there's a concern with, something going on personally, here's some questions, like open-ended questions. I think sometimes they want to, like we've talked about, do the talking, and they need to do more of the listening. So giving them, some examples of different kinds of conversations they may come across, and some questions. I mean, that's just a quick thing that I could think of, as well as, giving them training and things like that. But that's just a tool that they could use.
Yeah, if I could add to that too, I think also ensuring that you're having these meaningful conversations with your leaders and your managers. So being brave enough to kind of continue to, have these conversations, even though they may not want to. I also like to send articles and different TED Talks and all that kind of stuff, just to also just kind of start educating them, but then also follow up with a conversation of like, what did you think about that? What do you think of psychological safety? Let's have a conversation about it. So having some meaningful time with your leaders and your managers during one-on-ones or what have you to kind of have these conversations and really kind of equip them with the tools, I think is really helpful. But also understanding that you can't, I don't know if I'm ever going to change a leader per se, but I do want to ensure that they're educated and they have the tools needed to kind of have these conversations and cultivate that type of a work environment.
We've all got our stopwatches out now for 6 seconds. Go ahead, Kim. I see you muted there.
Yeah, so I think that we have in our previous company, we did a lot of L&D efforts and work, and we tied that with our ERGs. So we would have them sponsor some of our training, training events. And one thing that I think people, when they're open, they start to become more self-aware. One thing that a previous boss of mine recognized, she was a questioner. She had a lot of questions. She was one of those kind of, and it's great. And we certainly need that, but she would get stuck. So she would interrupt. So she recognized that actually was counter to what she was trying to do. And she didn't realize that was kind of almost like a passive aggressive feel. As she was going through that. And so she took that was her takeaway. And I thought that was huge because that is innately who she is. And she used to always apologize. Just, I don't know if the cat's right back there. I don't know if you can see her. Anyway, so she took that away and she tried to work on it because that was one of her things. We'd be in meetings and she's like, I'm sorry, I can't move on. So she would write them down. And we all knew to give her that also to give her that space for those questions.
I just want to interject that I love that. I also love your cat. I feel like she was like bumping that up. She really moved in that statement. And that self-aware, I think that's great when you can get leaders to the point where they can embrace, and we talked a little bit about that uncomfortableness, right? Because it is uncomfortable to be the leader and admit that you're doing something that might be having a negative impact on your team, but then how you worked with her to find a way around that. Like, I'm going to write those questions down so I don't feel the need to be asking them. I am a little bit of an interrupter myself. So that on top of the 6-second rule, I think is such a great thing to be able to apply there. But self-awareness is such a key thing for leaders. Other thoughts on that?
I saw someone in the chat say the first step is getting leaders open for this possibility, right? That they need to be coaching their employees. And I really love that. And I think one of the things that helps is giving them some self-reflection. If you have a training or a course, whatever, give the leader some, ask some questions that give them time to reflect about how they're showing up, that some of those emotional intelligence things. How do they show up to their people? Are they the one that's talking all the time? Are they the one that's interrupting? Are they practicing active listening skills, or are they getting distracted? Are they being genuine in the way that they're showing up for their people and not just, trying to do what they were told to do? So I think if you give them the time to self-reflect and also give them the time to think about who are the best leaders they've ever had and what were the behaviors those leaders were demonstrating, just some of those things will help them understand, the case for being a good coach and a good leader.
Yeah, I really love that, Lane. I've heard of the concept before. Mark Brackett talks about in his book, Permission to Feel, the idea of your best self as an activity that you can do. And I think for leaders, it'd be such a powerful thing to say, what's my best leadership? When I'm spot on for my team, what does it look like? And then similar to that 6-second rule that we were talking about there earlier, he described the idea of a meta moment. So when something happens, you pause. And in that, rather than reacting right away, you think of how will I respond in order to be my best self in that moment. So having that self-reflection is such an important thing for leaders to be doing. Alinda, anything you want to add there? I know we're coming and going. I know I get you on the Monday morning internet. It's sometimes tech doesn't want to work for us.
This Monday morning internet connection is, yeah, my goodness, I don't know. But the one thing I would add is, over the years, I've noticed it's really good as a reader myself. It's good for me to keep a resource of books. And over the years, I've had like a library that my managers could check out to like learn certain things around the behaviors and the frameworks and even the what to say in certain situations. And I've gotten to the point where I'll even write talking points and go back and forth with them and practice a conversation if they didn't feel comfortable having it with their employee because it was somewhat difficult. So I've just learned to keep a resource of books I call my little library that I share with leaders who want to learn more about coaching, want to learn more about psychological safety. And then, I'll role play if necessary so that they can feel more comfortable going into that situation and come back to outcome.
Yeah, I love that. At books, I go to everything. I mean, whatever question I have, I go to books for them. And there's so many good ones out there for people to have. And I also think too, a lot of times when we talk about leadership, we talk about nonfiction. But if you're building your emotional intelligence, reading fiction goes a really long way to building your empathy skills, building your perspective taking. So as a leader, I think, read more fiction too, get, whatever it is, science fiction, fantasy, your choice, but just to be able to put yourself in a different mindset. We talked a lot about individuals, whether they be team members or leaders, but the fact is within all those people operate within a system for an organization. Our behaviors and our actions, our emotions are all going to be influenced by that environment that we are in. So are there examples of systemic changes that can be made in organizations to create inclusive and positive work environments, whether they be policies or procedures? Are there things that we can do at a systems level in order to promote that so that people are more likely to build psychological safety and inclusion?
I can share some of the things that we've done. So where I'm at now, we do an annual psychological safety survey, and the whole intent is to help managers understand not just engagement, but how their teams are feeling as far as that psychological safety. And from there we have leadership action plans, and the business partner team help to drive some of those action plans, but the onus is really on the leadership and how they impact that. Some of the other things that we have done is looking at, we talk about everyone talks about recruitment and some of those goals that you have, right? But if they don't have a place, if you've done all of your best talent acquisition strategies to bring in and bring in the diversity and communities that you're looking for, if they don't have anything when they get there, it impacts. So, that's kind of a false window, kind of storefront. So making sure things like your benefits are targeting and focusing on the groups that you're looking at. The policies for sure, and ERGs, bringing them up to the leadership level. We used to do a summit with our ERG leadership and our executive leadership on an annual basis to set strategies and goals so that everyone was sort of aligned and on the same page. So these are our goals and targets as an ERG, and this is what you're not supposed to do, but here's some of your actions as an ERG, and here's the accountability on the leadership side. So really, it's not the storefront. It's not all of what we have on LinkedIn and maybe Glassdoor as far as what we're doing. But when you get there, the things match, things fit. There's that community that we've spoken about externally.
I think also building it into your core values so that everyone sees it as something that, is part of the DNA of the company, and that they can see it throughout the whole system, from the leadership level all the way down, in the benefits and the rewards and the I&D programming, things like that. But, having psychological safety or belonging or something like that as part of the core values, and then taking those intentional actions to really make sure that that is throughout the whole system.
I agree. I'd also, similar to kind of what Kim was saying too, is ensuring that it's embedded in a lot of different processes. So, as you look at the recruitment process, where does psychological safety kind of take a place in that? As you're looking at reviews and giving feedback, how does psychological safety and belonging show up in those areas as well? And continuously hitting that, so being that squeaky wheel or beating the drum multiple times, I feel like the more times that you can call things in like that, is the more folks are going to kind of say, okay, now I get what Richard's saying about psychological safety and belonging. He's said this multiple times. This is how it shows up in this, and then it continues to grow. So the more you can kind of hit that, I think it's also helpful in driving that type of environment.
I believe that sometimes organizations may run the risk of becoming insular in the ways that they operate and not necessarily looking at what's happening outside of their four walls. And they believe that they're creating psychological safety or, any other, concept for you name it. And if they're looking to do something systemically, it's necessary to kind of look at what others are doing from a best practices standpoint. One of the things that we do is participate in indices and list activities so that we can understand how do we look internally compared to what some of the best practices are that's happening externally. So listening to your employees is very, very good, and making sure that you are displaying the characteristics of an organization that's inclusive is very important, but also making sure that you're showing you're not afraid to do something different. If something is an issue or if there's something new that comes on the scene, you can actually respond to that. So being a bit agile around the uh, the uh, the need out there. So not being insular and actually looking outside of your organization shows that you're really looking to find ways of bettering your organization.
I really like that, Alinda, because I think within organizations, we become siloed in departments. And within organizations themselves become siloed, as you were talking about. And I think, too, that sometimes you get industries that become siloed. And even going outside of your own industry, like you see a lot of the tech industries, they all do things, similar in their industries, but, looking outside of your industry itself, too, and asking what are other organizations completely different from yours. I think that's such a great idea to be able to go beyond that. That's awesome. What are some of the common pitfalls that HR or HR departments or the people operations face when they're looking to build this type of environment? So when you're looking to build an inclusive work environment, what are some of the things that you might bump up against? And are there tactics that can be used to overcome these or combat these?
I believe one of the first things that you run into is that, well, you're HR and I, feel like I can't necessarily trust that you're going to be on my side because you work for the company and I don't feel safe sharing certain things with you as you are HR. And I think that that's something that you simply overcome in the way that you display your values and how you deliver the services that you deliver. So I think that's a really big obstacle that sometimes in some companies you have to overcome because there may be history there that has absolutely nothing to do with you as an individual, but the chatter is saying, HR is blank or HR is this or that. So that's one of the biggest things that you have to overcome is sometimes the history sometimes the ways that people perceive HR.
I agree. I also think that, oftentimes this comes across as this is a people or an HR or an thing. This is our initiative. And so, the accountability, the metrics, everything is kind of somehow falls to us. We can't solve it. We can give all of the coaching. We can do all of those things. We can put, that in place, but it's not, we're a party of one in that regards. And we can't do it. And I think that oftentimes that kind of falls to an HR initiative.
Yeah, I think along those lines, what I call lip service leaders, ones that say that they care or that, it's a priority, but they're not themselves creating those psychologically safe teams. So just, getting your leaders to be serious about it is hard because they have competing priorities, right? I mean, there are always in a business a ton of things going on. So I think another barrier is competing priorities, I would say. And how do you get this, to the top of the agenda when there are so many other things? And that's a tough one, right? I think you really, as a leadership team, maybe your executive committee or whatever, really needs to agree on what are the top priorities that are important to us. And it may not be this always, or, maybe they think it's good enough. I don't know. But, lip service leaders and prioritization, I would say, can be really, really tough.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind expanding on that because I agree. I think that is one of the toughest because I don't know how many articles and podcasts and webinars and books that I've seen where we talk about diversity and inclusion and psychological safety. And there is that fear that they're going to become just buzzwords within organizations, right? We make sure that we write them down in a document or we say them in a town hall meeting. But how can we ensure that these become deeply embedded in the fabric of an organization? Like what can leaders and HR and people operations do to make sure that these things aren't just nice words we say, but they're becoming part of how we operate?
I like to do something called calling in instead of calling out. So, when I feel that there's a situation where psychological safety or, folks aren't feeling like there's a sense of belonging or anything like that, working with that leader or that manager or that employee and calling them in and kind of having a conversation about it and almost kind of peeling back the onion on kind of, where that thinking kind of came from and doing a little bit more coaching, kind of to what Alenda had kind of mentioned as well too, is being able to have those difficult conversations with those folks, call them in, and help to kind of have a little bit more of a conversation around, everything that's kind of going on and what it looks like and what it might look like. And then also, I always say, I think modeling is probably one of the best ways to really kind of drive a lot of DEI work throughout an organization, is making sure that you're doing that and showing it, and also calling it in as calling it out as well. This is an example of trying to foster, psychological safety. It sounds very basic. And also I think it's really powerful in being transparent and being honest and vulnerable that we're all in a journey. We're not all going to get it right. We're in different places, and it's all about how we kind of move through this journey and learn from one another, I think is really powerful.
I think one thing that Alenda said earlier about looking at what's going on in the external environment as well, because those are opportunities when leaders can really bring it in. I mean, it may be hard to talk about things like that, but when there are things going on in the media that are bringing to the attention some of these issues, that's really a good opportunity for either, the company to make a statement or the leaders at least to talk about it and make it a safe place where people can come together and talk about those issues. And there's stuff like that going on all the time. So there are always opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. I think, oh, sorry, go ahead, Linda. Nope. I will go ahead then. Oh, no, she's unmuted again. I'm going to be quiet.
I keep getting this glitch. When you talk about embedding DE&I into, the work, I think about the way that my company has done this. Not only do we have the voice from the executive levels of the company, we have our CEO, who's a very strong proponent of the work. We have our, vice presidents who are promoting it through their organizations. Not only do we have our leaders talking about it and modeling the behaviors that's part of our inclusion competencies set, but we also have our employees who are part of our associate resource groups, our ARGs, we call them. And they're working the competencies, from the other levels of the organization. And we're all kind of meeting each other in the same place. And when we're identifying a gap, we figure out how do we further embed these ideals? How do we further embed these actions into the business imperatives? And we're working together to do that. We have our ARG leaders that meet with our officer community every quarter to talk about those ideas that are important to their communities and how they see the impact within their different business units and within their ARGs, et cetera. Like, how can we work together to find ways of embedding DE&I into it in a way that makes sense for our company? Because not everything is cookie cutter and can, fit into other organizations. So we make sure that the conversation at the top of the house is making its way down, and that the ideas and thoughts that are everywhere else in the house are making it up, and we find a way to make it work in the middle.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a valuable thing to be able to be doing. What can we do to be measuring this? So it's good to talk about it. It's good to be promoting it. How do we measure the effectiveness in driving a roadmap for a positive work environment that's promoting psychological safety and belonging? We all know, what's that saying? It's going to elude me about if you measure it, you focus on it, or it's something to that. I butchered it, but it's something to that effect that we measure the things that we're paying attention to. So how can we go about making sure that we're measuring to see that we're doing things well, or there might be things that we need to be adjusting?
Yeah, I think Kim mentioned this earlier too, and I love that idea of having an actual psychological safety survey. I also think pulse surveys are really important too in this. Looking at employer engagement surveys can kind of tell a lot of information. I also think just like basic talking with your employees about how they're feeling, and also really kind of taking that holistic view of how folks are interacting, how people are communicating, how people cultivate relationships, but then also just kind of touching base with folks and just saying, how you feeling, what's working, how's your relationship with your manager, with leadership. If you have that relationship with your employees, I think that can be even more powerful and also give you some qualitative and quantitative data if you're doing both of those items.
Renee, I think you were trying to say measure what matters. And there's those goals, and you can look at them in a variety of different ways. Of course, again, oftentimes the business will focus on the recruitment strategy, but then looking at your equity, and not just pay equity, which is super important, but equity, the access to L&D. How many of the folks who identify themselves in a a certain community, are they accessing your L&D benefits equitably? How does their promotion scale? What is that looking like? What is your turnover looking like? How do we measure those things? So not just when they get in the door, but what are they doing when they're here? And Richard, you had mentioned a previous question about like performance reviews and things like that, and I think understanding the biases within that, how the feedback goes. So, are you telling a female identified person that they seem to be emotional, but a male identified person, you're telling them that their technical skills, something that they can really action on, is maybe that's their feedback, and how do we balance that and be aware of it, and kind of bring that into that process as well.
I really like that focus on the performance review area that we talked about there, performance feedback. Are there other areas within the employee experience that we might need to be focusing more on psychological safety and inclusion when it comes to promoting a positive environment? I like how we focus on one of the areas there. Are there other ones where we could see people maybe bumping up efforts or making sure that they're not getting left behind when it comes to the employee experience?
I think I'd probably say learning
I
and
would be
development.
the main person to.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Do you want to go first?
I'm going to make an executive decision. I'm going to say, Alinda, you go first. And then we'll do Richard.
Go ahead, Richard.
Oh,
Oh,
all right.
okay.
I'll go really quick. I'll go very quick.
I would be the first person
Go ahead.
to
Go
say
ahead.
that development in our development processes is really important for us to look at whether or not we're creating psychological safety, because that process is what shows us that we are invested in that employee. It shows us that we want them to be part of the future of the organization, and it gives them the skills that's necessary. So if you do not have psychological safety within that particular space, you're not growing your people, you're not growing your organization as a result of it either. So paying more attention to how we are intentionally creating development opportunities and walking our people through that development process, I think is really important. Okay, I'll be quiet. I'll let Richard talk.
No. I was going to say the same exact thing, Alinda. I was thinking learning and development are so important. So we were right there. One thing I also wanted to add to with learning and development too is even just feedback. If you are not comfortable, receiving feedback or giving feedback to somebody as well, like how else are you learning? I think feedback is so critical in our development and our learning. And without having that kind of relationship where you feel psychologically safe to give it, but then also to receive it, I think it's also it's impacting your ability to develop and learn as well too. So psychological safety really plays such a huge role, especially in L&D, I feel.
I think when we think about just diversity as a whole, talent reviews and succession planning are a big opportunity, because I think we do have that bias of wanting to surround ourselves with people who look and act like us. So the people that they think are going to be the best successors are the people that look and act like them, right? Because they think that is the mold, or they think themselves are the mold or the model for who should be in the succession plan. So I think really challenging leaders to look at, how could this role be done with different strengths, with different capabilities, because everyone brings to the role something different, right? And so when you're going through a succession planning exercise, just really having someone who's keeping that lens and thinking about it. And the same with talent reviews, when you're trying to identify your high potentials, your high performers, what are some of the biases that are creeping in there? Are there, recency bias or halo bias, or, all of those things? Just, having someone who's kind of responsible so everyone is okay, because they know that person's going to be asking those questions, bringing that in and trying to really challenge yourself to come up with a more inclusive looking talent review process.
Yeah, I like the focus on feedback too. And I agree, Lane, the more we can understand the huge amount of biases that we have, the better off we're all going to be. Even the fact that a lot of the feedback that we give is subjective. Like, unless we're telling people specific pathways to do things or something that's concrete knowledge, pretty much all the feedback we give is subjective. What's organized to me is disorganized to somebody else. You know, something that I find persuasive, somebody else may not find persuasive at all. But yet these are things that we sometimes coach people on. And there's nothing wrong with that. But even just acknowledging this is how what you did impacted me, so that somebody is not getting that perception that, oh, well, that's just the hard and fast rule of how it needs to be, but I don't agree with you. So we get that, you know, the psychological safety gets a bit damaged there. But if I'm saying to Richard, you know, when you gave that presentation, this, and this impacted me this way. So it's not necessarily saying that the entire audience felt that way, but maybe we can discuss ways that we could shift that. And I think that's where we start building the trust that we talked about earlier within it. And I like when we talk about feedback too, that a lot of times we focus on constructive feedback. We don't necessarily talk about the positive feedback. And I know people are dying for the appreciation and recognition within those workplaces. And a great way to build that positive environment is building in more opportunities to appreciate and recognize people. I know that we have another Hacking HR panel coming up at, I'm not going to give the time, at the hour, because I know everybody's on different hours. And I know that today is also World Kindness Day. LinkedIn has let me know about that. Everybody's posting some really great posts. And I think that kindness is such an integral matter to actually building a positive workplace and promoting psychological safety. So with that in mind, I thought maybe we could finish off if everybody could share perhaps one kind thing that people could do today at work that could help create this type of positive work environment. So I'm putting you on the spot. So one kind thing that somebody could easily do within their team to help promote this type of positive workplace that we want.
I'll take it. I'll start. I'm going to be very basic. I think just smiling and greeting somebody, it goes so far in just even setting the tone for any kind of relationship or any kind of interaction. So a lot of times I think smiling, acknowledging someone, greeting them is a first step in any kind of interaction or interpersonal.
I think along those lines, asking the question of like, how are you really doing? Not just, hey, how's it going? Yeah, it's good. You know, but pausing and starting a meeting or ending a meeting with a little bit more of that personal dialogue to get to know people a little bit better.
I'll add on to something you were saying earlier, Renee, about positive feedback. Taking the time to say thank you to people. Today, you know, someone who helped you out on a project, or, you know, thank you to your manager or anyone, just saying thank you and then asking them to pay it forward. Then the kindness will spread.
Melinda, do you have one to add? Yeah.
One of the things that I do with my team is, I ask my team, like when we're meeting early, and like, you don't have to give an explanation of why you say those words, but just give us 2 words about where you are. And it's kind of a check-in because you never know what a person may be going through. So it's always good to just kind of know how the tone of the room is set up when you're.
Yeah, I love that. So positive demeanor, asking people how they are, saying thank you to one another. And you're exactly right, Lane. It does spread. We know that when people treat us with kindly, we're more likely to go on and treat other people with kindness. And I think that when we build that in at an individual level, a leadership level, and a systemic level, that's when we truly build workplaces that are going to be more positive, more inclusive, and promote that psychological safety and belonging that we all want. So with that said, great conversation. I know we could talk longer on this, as we always could when it comes to these conversations, but thank you, Kim, Lane, Richard, and Alenda for joining me. Thank you everybody in the chat for putting your things in there. And if you have other suggestions on ways to be kind, add those in there as well, as we hope to spread more kindness today on World Kindness Day and every day as part of the year as well. But again, thank you for joining. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their morning, afternoon, or evening. Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
everyone, and welcome to the second conversation of today, part of our November series. We will be chatting a little bit over the next hour about how to best connect the dots and what we mean by dots. On one hand, robust DEIB initiatives, and the other, business and people and creating value for them. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co-host for the next hour. We have Jessa backstage taking good care of us. And we also have an amazing lineup of speakers all ready to share their insights, their energy, and advocating for robust DEIB initiatives. So Jessa, please do help me bring them on the screen. And while they pop up, I will just continue to welcome people who join us. Also welcome back for those of you who stayed with us from the previous conversation. It was simply amazing. I listened in and I have lots and lots of notes. So please do let us know in the chat where you're listening or watching us from this wonderful world. It always makes us curious to see where are we traveling around the world with our panel conversations. And last but not least, please do consider this conversation as much yours as it is our panelists. So drop us your thoughts, your opinions, your information, any resources that you have found helpful or useful or inspiring in your work, and help us build the community. Now, let's try to make this a full hour of inspiring exchange. And we will start off with our signature intro rounds. And what I will do, I will pass the e-mic around clockwise as you appear on my screen. And it's an easy ask, this one. So just kindly, shortly introduce yourselves and do share with us something from your DEIB journey that really made this topic near and dear to your heart. And what I will do, I will start with you, Godzi, and then we will move around. We will move around the screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, so my name is Ngozi Okay, and I'm Global Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Nextral, a marketing tech company. And a bit about what makes this topic near and dear to my heart is I think the understanding over my career about the importance of really learning the workplace, right? DEI is not a one-size-fits-all sort of game. And so really learning the workplace, really learning the stakeholders, really understanding what piques their interest has really been a game changer in actually getting buy-in and partnership for this work. And we all know that it's one person can't do it. So you need that buy-in, you need that partnership, but how to get there, I think can be, can be a learning curve. And so that's the journey that has really led this topic to catch my attention.
Thank you so very much. And also special gratitude for so graciously bringing me back from my Starbucks moment there with mispronouncing your name. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. Sundari, good to see you. Welcome.
Hi, good to see everyone. Thank you so much, and happy World Kindness Day. So it's a great start to the morning at most places. I'm a conversation catalyst, so which means that I help leaders and teams be more human at work using business storytelling. And that's the lens I want to bring in for the D&I work as well. And it always reminds me about an incident that happened recently at a panel that I was listening into, where one of the law firms said, "Oh, we are great with D&I. We've baked it into our system. We've got it as part of our, KRAs." And there was another organization which said, "Oh, we are just happy to look at our values, which is we want people to feel welcome, safe, valued, and respected. And we are still in the journey." And I think just listening to these diverse journeys of organizations and acknowledging that each of them would be on a different path is very motivating. I think the self-awareness to deal with it as it is and go forward. I think that's That's what makes it interesting and challenging.
Thank you so very much, Sundari. Jennifer, good to see you. Back to our conversation. Yep, we can hear you. There's some background noise, but
Okay.
we can hear
Great.
you.
My mute and unmute button wasn't working, so thank you very much for the technical assist on that. I am with Cirque Reliability Corporation, and I've been in HR, I don't want to age myself, but over 30 years, and I've been privileged enough to see it grow and develop and expand the role of being a meaningful place for people to work. A few years ago, I decided to get my Certified Diversity Executive certification. So I have, and I've been asked back to teach several guest lectures of that. So that's been a wonderful experience. I'm also somebody who has a hidden disability, and I don't want to say a hidden minority, but people looking at me don't always assume that I'm part of a minority. And one of my big pushes where I work is to have these conversations we call coffee talk, and talk to people about not assuming that somebody is, quote, normal or mainstream, right? Just because you can't see what their differences may be, and to be respectful and open and welcoming to everybody, whether or not you think they need special treatment. I think we should just treat everybody with respect and as the special people they are. So that's really what is driving my interest.
Thank you so very much. Alenda, good to see you, and good to see you from the previous conversation as well. So today is a Hacking HR marathon for you.
Yes, I'm doing marathon day today. So hello, everyone. My name is Alinda Durr, and I lead DE&I for US Cellular. One of the things that makes DE&I near and dear to my heart is I knew from the very beginning that I was always put in a position with a organization. So whether I was in school, I was asked to be a peer counselor. If I were, I was always the person in college that they would ask to help introduce a person around, that kind of thing. So I really looked to lean into a career that helped lean upon that strength. And so what made DE&I near and dear to my heart is that you have the person and then you have the business. And DE&I, to me, and the work that happens within this particular area, it's the connective tissue that helps to balance it all out and make sure that we are pulling one another along in the best ways possible. And that we can see, the optimal, we can, look into things from different dynamic perspectives so that we can make the best of the business, so that we can find the work that I'm doing as the connective tissue to help pull those muscles and get everyone where we need to go.
Thank you so very much. And I just want to let you know that there is a little bit of a slow in your audio and video. So if at any moment in time we move the conversation, please know that we can't hear you properly. But for now, it worked. Let's go agile and not fragile. Today is not the best day for technology. Alicia, good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Alicia Gill. I'm the founder and CEO of the North Star organization. And we are really focused on helping organizations to ensure that they can retain their key talent, right? And also working individually with executives to make sure they can bring their best. DE&I is really important to me, not least because in order for organizations to work, they have to get the people part right? You have to get the people part right. It's one of the biggest investments an organization is going to make. So if you're going to go ahead and make that investment, just like you would do with any other part of the business, you would insure it. So you would do everything that you could to make sure that you had the best workforce, and you would do everything that you could to make sure that you created the conditions for that workforce to do their best work. And that's what happens when you have an organization that's growing, that's productive, and that's innovative. Those are the basic things that you do. So it's so interesting when people say, why are we doing this? Why is this important? Because people are important and people are different. So let's go about the business of getting everybody the things they need to show up and do their best work.
Well, how absolutely wonderful. I was so looking forward to this conversation. And before we start to get our usual questions right about now, yes, this conversation is being recorded, and you can go back and enjoy it either on our LinkedIn space or hackinghrlab.io, our platform. Now, when I saw the title of the panel, I must say that the word that immediately jumped at me was robust. And we had so many conversations in previous panels when we acknowledged the reality that while in many organizations, DEIB is the right thing to do, it still has quite a lot of intense programmatic feel to it. It's a program, it's an initiative, it's an event. So my first question to all of you is, what do we mean by robust DEIB? How can we recognize when DEIB is part of the very fabric of an organization and it's a culture statement in and of itself? And those of you who have been watching Hacking HR panels, you know that I always start going diagonally. I don't know why, but now it became my superstition. So Alenda, would you please be the pioneer for this one?
Sure. When you talk about DEIB being part of the fabric, to me, it's honestly a part of, goodness, how do I put it? I'm trying to figure out my words now. So that it is part of the fabric when it is something that's not necessarily been led as an initiative. If it becomes a way of business, it becomes a way of the operational aspect of your company, because you'll have those who are thinking about things from the DE&I lens. You'll have them when they're writing policies, when they're writing their procedures, when they're reviewing how they're recruiting and promoting and developing. You'll know that it's not just a programmatic effort when it becomes a way of doing business. And that's one of the things that we're striving for here at my company, because of the way that we've aligned ourselves. We made sure that we have access to the business in a way that helps us identify those places where we can embed DE&I so that it's meaningful, so that it's something that we're not always pushing. It always makes my heart feel, it just makes my heart jump when I, with a DE&I perspective, and, when they're doing major enterprise work and projects, and how they added inclusion as one of the ways that they're focused on the work. So my effort is really, I'd love to work myself down to, not necessarily out of a job, but I'd love to work myself to the point where I am more of a consultant than the person that's pushing it, because the leaders and the employees are the ones who have ingrained it to the point that it becomes a way of doing business.
How wonderful. And now the unmuting competition is officially open. Let's see who has trained their dexterity for this. Sundari.
No, it's wonderful. I love the words which have been part of the initial conversations, both the connective tissue part, how do you bake it into the system, how do you make it as part of the fabric. So for me, I think it's being robust is also being agile and being aware. So you can create something to be really strong when it has actually been beaten and molded and changed and, made into things. And this is my clay work coming into play a little bit, part of it. I have a a friend that I know who is a D&I consultant, but she's also the founder of a manufacturing unit. She's a co-founder of a manufacturing unit. And one of the things that they said is, of course, since she's a D&I consultant, it's a world of awareness that she always has. We want to get more women into the workforce, she said, and all that. And they had all those goals. But when they were actually trying to generate more employment for women, they weren't necessarily looking at it only from a gender lens, just for example. They wanted equal opportunities for both genders. So they worked at equity. They said, we want both male machine operators and female machine operators. In their case, those were the two distinctive categories. And they wanted them on the same pay scale. But what they found out was they were experiencing attrition at the shop floor, and somehow they went to the conclusion that rural women that they were employing did not understand the importance of employment or didn't want to be financially independent. But when they dug in and went back to explore what had happened, it was just that the women in the nearby villages said traveling long distances was a problem. So sometimes you just have to dig in to make something robust into a system. You have to dig in, ask, understand, and not assume. So then they went on and just hired buses and gave them transportation to come. And today they have a skew on the women employees who are able to come and work there. So I think making something robust is a journey. It's a journey of awareness. It's a journey of being open. It's a journey of being agile, not fragile, to quote you, Manila. So, and it's a process.
Alicia, please, I see you unmuted.
Okay, I see how this works now. I see what we're doing. Okay. I think one of the things that comes to mind when I think robust, sort of think they mean the opposite of performative, don't they, when they say that? I think that what we really need to do is to be thoughtful about what we are actually trying to achieve, right? We can throw these letters out there, and then we all get excited, put a program, give some dollars, put in somebody's title, do all these different things. But ultimately, what do you want to have happen? Right? Like, what is your objective? There's no company out here who's saying we're just going to grow as much revenue as possible, right? They have targets for themselves. They have objectives. They know what success looks like, right? So I think that without objectives, without targets, quantitative and qualitative, without a clear idea of where you're headed to, it's not a robust strategy. It's a set of activities that might land you where you want to go, but it might not. I don't know. But if there's going to be seriousness around this, and particularly if you want the seriousness to exist at the very top levels of an organization, they know in the C-suite, I was there, I'm there now, that anything that's seriously spoken about has an objective and a target to it. Not that that's the only thing you talk about, but the things that are serious and taken very seriously and understood throughout the business have that as a characteristic. And I think that DEIB, if it's going to be taken seriously, needs to be treated the same way.
Jennifer, please.
Hi. We actually grew this effort kind of organically. Our 4 cultural attributes are leader, collaborative, purposeful, and expert, and we weave them into everything we do. So anytime we want to decide on a project, on an initiative, does this support our cultural attributes? Can we embody our cultural attributes with this initiative? And so DEIB came very naturally to us as far as the passion for it. And to your point, we have a wonderful analytics department who said, what gets measured gets done, right? So we basically cast a very wide net. We said, anybody in the company who would like to be in our original employee resource group, which we call CERC1, is welcome. And let's grow this organically, and let's find out where people's passions lie so that we can be inclusive. And we measure with not only with metrics, but we also have an employee engagement survey, and we include questions about DEIB in there, which we find very enlightening. People are much more apt to share if it's anonymous. I'm sure we can all relate to that. But the other thing is that it's just been so, I hate to use the word inclusive, right? Because it's in it, but it really is, from the CEO to the receptionist. Everybody in the company is aware of our initiative and is sending ideas and wants to come to meetings. We just recently held planning sessions for 2024, and out of 105 employees, I had 84 attend the meeting, which I was very thankful for, and some people just couldn't because of work commitments or previous PTO. It was really heartening just heartening to see it, and I'm just really excited. And the one thing I think that sums it up the best is our CEO asked me how I was doing and how I felt about everything that was going on. And I said, at my last, where I am now, I feel engaged and accepted. And looking back now at my last job, I felt tolerated. And I had to get some distance from that role and that organization to be able to appreciate what I have now. And it was really enlightening.
Hi. So I remember, so the prompt of this, the word robust actually stood out to me as well. And I really started thinking about what that meant in terms of DEI, and it brought me to earlier in my career. And I remember earlier in my career, and in leading diversity, equity, and inclusion for there was an organization in particular. I remember I found it, and mind you, this particular organization didn't have a lot of racial diversity, didn't have a lot of gender diversity, especially in leadership. And so there was a lot of work to do. And I remember, trying to have conversation and trying to get buy-in around what needed to be done to increase diversity representation of underrepresented groups. And I remember that there was a huge attempt to sort of deflect the conversation, because to really talk about marginalized and underrepresented groups, we're talking the Black people in the organization, we're talking Hispanic people in the organization, we're talking Asian people within the organization, and then in levels of leadership, you kind of have to sit with some discomfort, right? Especially if it's a relatively homogenous group that you're talking about, white male dominated space. There's going to be a lot of discomfort in that conversation. And I remember that what I was finding is that I was trying to get some clarity and some focus around what needed to be done around the groups that were underrepresented and marginalized in that space. And there was a lot of discomfort around that. And therefore, there was sort of an attempt to expand the scope to deflect the focused conversation. And so I remember lots of moments of having conversation around, here are, sort of the big groups that we'll start with right now, right? Because one person can't do all things, can't do it all right now. So let's start someplace. Let's take a step and then two steps. And those conversations were sort of met with, well, what about this? Let's expand the scope. Let's not talk about race. Let's not talk about gender. Let's, talk about other things. Let's talk about diversity of thought, which unless, in that particular scenario, we needed to get really tangible and really clear around the groups that we were talking about. And yet they thought that they were creating a more robust sort of viewpoint or strategy around what we needed to do. And so that's sort of the memory that that kept coming back for me and thinking about, well, what is it to have a robust, DEI initiative? And I think that the thing that sticks with me is I do agree with Alenda in that, for it to be robust, it really means that it is something that has become innate to the organization, right? Through all parts of the organization. So you don't necessarily have to be the main driver, right? You act as a DEI practitioner, you act more as a consultant, right? As opposed to the person that's pushing and trying to get it adopted and trying to get the buy-in. The buy-in is there. And the thing that sticks with me though is a lot of organizations are not there yet. Right. And they shouldn't believe that. They don't need to believe they're there yet. Right. Or else they'll sort of miss the point. They'll miss the goal. It's okay to understand that maybe you're at the beginning stages of your DEI journey. And I think that the most important thing at that stage is to get really clear, right, about what your needs are as an organization, to lean into those conversations that might otherwise be uncomfortable for you. Like who are the groups that are underrepresented and marginalized within your organization, within your industry, right? Why is that, right? What does equity mean, right? And what does it mean for you as an organization to really say that you are embracing equity, right, in your practices? And so I really encourage, folks or companies to be on their journey towards a robust DEI initiative, but to really get clear and recognize where they're at and, just know that the progress is very important in getting there.
Thank you so very much for sharing that story. And Alicia, something that you said really made me do a mental post-it. You said, what are you trying to achieve? And I would invite all of you, let's just take a few minutes and go down this avenue of conversation. How do we look for the why of a robust DEIB initiative? And then if you can share your thoughts on this, Alicia. And now all of you build your own conversation after Alicia.
Okay, no, absolutely. I think that there needs to be an understanding of the culture you have and the culture you want to have, right? Things like employee engagement surveys help. Sometimes just looking at how high the attrition is in certain groups, that data is the answer right there. People make the ultimate decision with their feet. They don't have to work for you, right? But I think given what's happening in the culture is going to help you determine what objectives you should set for yourself and what you should then do, right? So for some people, the biggest issue is they're not diverse in the first place, right? So their focus is going to be on figuring out how to get a demographic profile that makes some sense given the sector they're in and given the region that they're in, right? So we've got to have more diversity in the workforce. That might be the main thing. The equity could be that they're observing in their company that women seem to be hitting a ceiling, or they hit a certain age and something happens, or nobody seems to ever want to come back from maternity leave. They quit, or like whatever the thing that they're seeing as the trouble spot should be the thing that's going to help drive what it is that they're going to do, right? I think especially for some of the mid-sized companies, it can be really very specific things that are happening. And so if you just adopt a more generic, we're going to have an ERG, we're going to do the annual survey, and we're all going to be nice to each other. And then we're going to say the word DEIB at every town hall meeting. And then we're going to, that's probably not it. If you really want it to be robust and meaningful, maybe that's another adjective I'd like to use for robust, meaningful. It has to be meaningful for the specific organization. So diversity, if that's the issue, you don't have you have a pretty homogeneous workforce, you should probably think about what you're going to do about that. Equity, if you're seeing different populations move in different types of ways. And inclusion and belonging, look, you don't tell people that you're inclusive, they tell you, right? So you have to ask. And so that will help you understand where you are. But you mustn't be afraid to first do an assessment of where you're at. It doesn't have to be formal, but you have to be honest, because the employees know where you're at. So you need to get at least where they are and then have an honest conversation about that. And then you can together work with authenticity toward a goal that's going to be meaningful for the organization that you actually have.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that you have to look at where you are and where you're starting from. When I got to my organization almost 4 years ago, turnover was around 20%. People were unhappy. Engagement scores were low. So turnover was up, retention was down, and we worked very hard to have what we consider a cultural reset. But we couldn't do that without learning what the employees wanted and asking them to be part of the solution. And I'm very happy to say that our annual turnover now is less than 3%, and that our retention rate is 96%. And it's because the employees feel empowered to have these crucial conversations. They feel empowered to bring up challenging conversations because we've had training around that, around how do you get comfortable with having those uncomfortable conversations. I mentioned our analytics department. They have been wonderful in helping us measure and be very quantitative with what we're doing. And our numbers are showing it. We had 8 new hires this year. 6 of them are what we call boomerang employees, people who left because they weren't happy with the culture 4 years ago and who are now welcoming back. So I agree with you. It's a journey, and so far it's been wonderful, and I'm excited to see where the next year takes us.
So the topic on why, sort of like the why piece is very important. And however, I found that it could be a challenge because even when we talk about, what is an organization's why, the whole term of like an organization, a company is nothing more than its people, right? Like even if it's executive leadership, right? There is no empty building that runs itself, right? Or machine that operates itself. It's really all led, managed, overseen by people, right? And so when we think about what is the why, there's all this research out there that gives us the data to the why. But I found that, even sort of using the data piece for organizations, when we think, well, you need to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging because it's profit, helps you to become more profitable. That seems to make sense for us, right? It's like your business, you want to do more business as a business. So here's the key. What I found though, is that, it is really, really important for me to understand what really moves my stakeholders, right? Like what piques my CEO's interest, right? What do all of my other executive leaders really care about? What's the language that gets them excited? Like what is the specific metric that, that drives them, right? What do our senior leaders really care about? And I found that for, each leader or employee, it looks a little different. And so part of that sort of like initial like investigation stage to me in an organization is really understanding those things. And I take copious notes, when I'm meeting or coaching, leaders or employees, just like what excites them, what did I just say that makes their eyes light up? Because then I can reach into my DEI tool bag and, let them understand how DEI is the key for whatever it is that is of interest to them. Right. And so, yes, I think we can sort of set the direction for the organization. Like, here's the why we do this as an organization. But I think that, unless we actually like get into those spaces and those rooms and talk to those leaders and get their individual whys aligned, it otherwise tends to fall flat or feel inauthentic. And so I have found that why is, yes, organizational level, but, it really is one-on-one with those leaders, really getting them connected and understanding why this work is actually the key to what it is that they want for themselves or for their teams or for the organization.
Sundari.
No, lovely. So with you, Gossi, if I'm getting your name right, totally, on the alignment of ideas. And Jennifer, what impressive statistics, especially also with the boomerang employees. Definitely something to, I was looking at some of the statistics which talked about the D&I spends, D&I related efforts. So in 2021, things like, employee resource groups and all the other D&I efforts of organizations were at like $7.5 billion. And that's projected to double to $15.4 billion by 2026. So you really want leaders to be those, to use a metaphor, to be those lighthouses who are looking at shedding the light on getting all these resources fruitfully utilized. So you need them to look left, you need them to look right, up, down, and look at all their team members and ensure that everybody can really soar. And I think that's the theme of Adam Grant's latest book on hidden potential, on how do you really get each of your talent to soar and thrive. But it does look different for different organizations. So, and each of them are in their journey. Acknowledging that is important. So, there's a steel manufacturer in India called Tata Steel, which focused on getting an initiative on improving intersectional gender diversity, due to, by addressing some of the key root causes. There are stereotypes, there are lack of support structures, there are legal constraints, some places there are geographical constraints, stereotypes, and so many other issues around it. So they felt that that was one scale which was not moving. So they looked at multiple options, solutions, right from upskilling, career support, job opportunity creation, inclusive redesign of the policies, getting that work infrastructure, getting the legal assistance. And they ended up having, in about a couple of years back, the first ever transgender hiring program in India. And that was a milestone for them. Now, for some others, that may be normalized for some other organizations. And I was reading about Walmart doing an initiative which was totally at a different level, where they had all the, they had fair bit of diversity in the range of employees that they were having, but they found out that certain section of employees were not being socially mobile within the organization. They weren't getting the high paid jobs. And that could have been, at that time when they did the research, it was some of the Black and the Latino and Hispanic employees that they had. While they had an inclusive policy, they were not getting the high paid jobs. So they then went on getting a policy done on really looking at free education and upskilling, because the cost of that education to move to the higher ranks in the organization was an issue. Again, back to, I think for me, it's exploring root causes, doing that deep analysis, active listening at organizational level, and then making those differences for each geography, for each location, for each unit, each area. So really customizing these changes for ensuring that it's not, again, a tick mark exercise, but something that is very meaningful. Back to, robust equal to meaningful, Alicia, what you were saying, to make it meaningful for each of these places.
Thank you so much, Sundari. And Alenda, could you please wrap this one up? Well, I thought Friday the 13th was a bad luck day, but apparently Monday the whatever is tricky for technology. I would really need some help from anyone in the audience. For some reason, I can't see the comments for this panel. So just drop us, if nothing else, just test, or yes, we're here. So we know that you're still with us and we're not trapped in some LinkedIn live loop somewhere. Now, Alenda, can you join us now? Let's see. Oh, okay, that was radical, more radical than I thought, but fingers crossed. Now, Jennifer, I think my memory is not failing me when I seem to remember that you are the first one to say that, what gets measured gets done. And I picked up quite a lot of energy for KPIs and tracking and measuring. So could you please start the conversation around what and how can we measure, just so we make sure that we deliver meaningful value and to make sure that we're on track with the DEIB work in organizations?
Sure. I think it goes both ways. I think what's important to measure is also what's important to the organization. I am in the utility industry, and I hire a lot of um, engineers, licensed engineers, technical people, and I fight the battle all the time is who went to engineering school 30 years ago? White men, right? So if you have people who've been in the industry and you need somebody with 20 plus years experience, you're going to be inundated with applicants from white men, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, it just makes diversity a little more challenging. So what the HR team has done is to work with every hiring manager to say what's nice to have versus what's absolutely necessary. Can we take experience outside of our industry? Can we go to specific universities and colleges that may have a program that could lend itself to what we're doing? And can we grow and develop people? Do you have the bandwidth, right, to take somebody who maybe has 5 years of experience rather than 25 years of experience and surround them with people who can help them with that transfer of knowledge? So we look at things like where we're posting, how long we're posting, where we get our applicants from. We are very keen on employee rewards for successful candidates. So they receive a referral bonus when the person joins, and then after 6 months they get another one if the person is still there and both of them are in good standing. So that's been really helpful to us. We're looking at tenure by race, by gender, by age. We're looking at promotions by the same demographics. And then we're also performing an equity pay review twice a year to make sure that people in the same roles with the same experience are being paid fairly across our demographics. And that has been, the pay transparency especially has been very well received, and really the employees really appreciate it. We actually went one step further and did total compensation statements this year so that people could see it's not just your salary, but it's the PTO and the 401k match and the holidays and everything else that we're doing, your tuition reimbursement, to make sure that they knew that this was a well-rounded benefit and total compensation package. And then of course, we're always open to hearing what other people want to suggest for benefits for us to add. So those are the kind of things that our employees feel is important, and that we're continuing to measure and refine and keep and measure again.
Thank you so much. Please.
Yeah, similarly, so I'm in the tech industry, and similarly, we measure representation across race and gender right now. And we do that not just in the workforce as a whole, but we do that also for, different levels, right? Because we know that you see less diversity the higher you go in an organization, right? And so we track that for race and for gender as well. And then we also also track it for different functional roles, right? Because we're a tech organization. So yes, we look as a whole as an organization, right? Do our demographics look like as an organization? What does it look like sort of in leadership? But then we zero in on like our engineering roles too, right? And so we look for, race and gender. We track that and see what's going on. How can we, make sure that we are providing more access to our workforce, our workplace for women, for people of color. And then we do that also for our sales roles, right? Because we know that sort of historically and industry-wide, those are the sort of functional spaces that see far less diversity than the industry overall. And then we also look at, in terms of equity, one of the places that we really zero in on and track is not just pay equity, but it's also promotion, right? And so we track that for race and gender as well over time. And we sort of benchmark these things, not just against ourselves, over previous years to make sure that we are making progress over time, but we also benchmark ourselves against the industry, against, our peers, just to see how we're doing, how others are doing. And then we also we do a separate inclusion survey every year. And for that survey, we're looking across several different factors: voice, belonging, inclusive programs, and a variety of other different factors where there's lots of statements underneath. And what we do with that survey is we take a look at it sort of holistically. How does our workforce, how's our workforce sort of trending? What are they feeling? What are the needs? What are the gaps and opportunities? But then we also disaggregate, and it's an anonymous, confidential survey. We run it through a third party, but we are able to disaggregate that to see, okay, are there gaps in how our employees are experiencing the workplace, right? So we can disaggregate it and see, okay, for people of color in our workplace, right? Are they experiencing the workplace any differently, right? And can we pinpoint where that is? And then can we, try to make progress there, because we don't want to see, those gaps in experience. And then we look at it for gender and other dimensions as well. And so that's some of the ways that we are, very sort of data driven in our approach to make sure that we are tracking, that we're measuring, that we're setting goals, that we're tracking, and that we are holding ourselves accountable for making an impact.
Let's see, the battle for the hot seat of going last.
Well, I'll just say, I think I will not add to the litany of metrics that my fellow panelists have laid out. Those are all very important metrics. I think it is worth organizations thinking about which of those metrics do they want to render explicit and share with the entire company. I think there's a certain amount of authenticity that comes out of doing that. You can't share every metric, it's not appropriate, but you certainly can share some metrics. And I do think it's really important to make sure that it doesn't just end up, and I don't think this is happening in you ladies' organizations, but sometimes we end up with HR coming up with these data, and then it shows up in a report and nothing ever happens with the report, right? So the data has to actually result in something, right? Either a celebration of something achieved or a call to action for something else to be done or something, right? So it's unfortunately, sometimes it's rare to even capture the data, but I think all the data points they talked about are correct. I think it's very important, though, afterwards to share that, and then even more importantly, to do things based on what the data is telling you.
Sundari.
Yeah, no, I just had a comment. I mean, data, I think using some of the latest tech tools that we have, which I'm sure organizations are doing. So for so much that's being said against AI, really using some of those tools to measure better, disaggregate data and find out. So I remember even something as simple as had this conversation with somebody on change management. And then I went back to the transcript to have a look on share of voice and whether things like that are building inclusion in the meeting spaces. And organizations can start using some of these tools at very basic level to ensure that you're getting, say, your meeting etiquette sorted out. Are we hearing one voice more than the other and things like that? I'm hoping we will touch on it. So I will just suggest this and leave it here for now, which is on the whole intersectionality part. Because when we are measuring data on one attribute and there is cross sections and layers to that, I would really like to discuss that a little bit more or take it offline to say. And I think that is one of the issues that we are grappling with in Asia. Sitting here in Hong Kong, there are roles and people who don't fall into one or the other. And it's a really mixed, complicated issue. So in terms of measuring those and ensuring that organizations are really tracking how they are progressing on that.
Well, Sundari, you can't drop that conversation, Candy, when we are 10 minutes away from wrapping this up. And that alone deserves not another panel, but a whole series. However, I do want to take a few minutes. I promised myself that I will do this in every single panel. And so far, I managed to keep myself honest. All our conversations, they are so rich with inspiration and energy and insights and actionable, bits of wisdom. But it can feel a little bit overwhelming, and maybe even more so for those in the audience who are an HR function of one. So I would really invite all of you, just, take a short round of very concrete, robust and meaningful advice. How can those people that are HR function of one superhero focus their energy in such a way that they make the smallest action with the highest impact possible? And I will leave this question there, and let's see where inspiration strikes.
If I may add, I believe that one of the best places to start is really doing a good assessment of your organization to figure out where your issues are. Find out where you can be better, because if you do not walk into it with that knowledge, or at least the curiosity to get at what those issues are, you will not be able to put together a strategy that's effective or get the buy-in that is necessary. So I say, if you're going to do one thing and one thing well, because you may be a team of one or just, small and mighty, start with that strategy. There's a number of places you can go to see what other organizations are doing. You can bring in a consultant if you don't necessarily feel like you have the landscape of it together in front of you. But start with a strategy that starts with the business in mind. How do we impact the business and the bottom line? Because you want to be heard as like a seminal part of the overall plan and as part of a business imperative. So start with the strategy first and then work on getting that buy-in.
Alenda, you made my heart do a small happy dance, and not with arrhythmia, but with equal parts of joy and frustration. Joy to have you so, clear in audio, and frustration for not having had this so far. It's good to have you back. So, Ngezi.
Yeah, hi. So I like that viewpoint, Alenda. I do want to offer maybe an opposing viewpoint, right? Let's spice it up a little bit. And that's because I think that oftentimes one person actually is not may not be well positioned, or just doesn't have enough knowledge about the business to actually by themselves be able to really build out what a strategy looks like, or to really have that in-depth knowledge of what's needed here and what's needed there and what's needed there and what's needed there. And so I think, to the extent that they do have that knowledge and they are well positioned for that, I'd say yes, build that, because that's going to be the thing that you can now bring to people and say, hey, here's what we need to do. But to the extent that it's a one-person team and maybe you don't have that visibility or that sort of knowledge about the business, I'd say that I'd recommend spending time building buy-in and cultivating a coalition of people who do have those viewpoints within the business, right? Who, you have had those conversations and they are bought in and they are committed, right? And they are subject matter experts in their particular realms of the business. And then you can have meaningful conversations with them about, okay, well, what are these opportunities that you see, right? What are the gaps that you see there? And then they can help you build that strategy. But I think that to get there, sometimes the best first step is really to get that buy-in, right? Because one person can only do so much. And also, you don't want to position yourself that one person is going to go ahead and execute that strategy. It's like, no, I need your help to build this strategy. and to execute that strategy. And we'll start with the building so that we don't set that expectation in the execution.
I
Great.
think,
Jennifer, please.
I think there's two questions we need to answer. Who is your audience and what is your why? And I think that both of you spoke to that, right? Who are you trying to get buy-in from? And why do you want to do this? Why is this important to you personally? Why is this important to your company? Why is this important to your leadership team, to your employees? And I think that once you have those answers, that you will be able to answer all the other questions and things will start to open up for you. So I appreciate what both of you said just now, because I think that all rolls that into what's your why? Why do you want to do this? And why do you think your company should support it?
Alicia.
okay. One thing I do want to say, I agree with all of that. I do think that for the person who's sitting there as a group of one, I think it makes sense to look at whatever data you have. Sometimes it's limited, but that's okay. I do think it's important to get some anecdotal information yourself. First of all, in your job, you've had people sit across from you and say the things. They've cried to you, they've told you they resigned, they've told you that somebody said something that was out of school. So you know a lot already. So it may be helpful to reflect back on the conversation that you've been having with individual contributors and with managers. Go on a mini listening tour to maybe test some hypotheses you have about things that are going on. But I think the most important thing, after you've done that and you have a sense of what the most pressing things are, and that's not 20 things. Once you have a good idea of what the most pressing things are, then you'll pick a handful, like 2 or 3 things to work on. If you try to make this huge 10-point plan, not going to work. Start smaller. And that doesn't mean you're being performative and not robust because you're starting smaller. It means you're smarter and more strategic about how you're doing it. And you're allowing yourself to get some wins and points on the board that get people comfortable and maybe more bought in. That will then help you go forward because you personally don't scale, as was said. You can't do it by yourself. So get as much intel as you can, see how much of it you can get personally, and then figure out what are the 1, 2, 3 things you'd like to work on, and then chisel away and get buy-in and support as you go. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, definitely. I think where I've seen some of these measures fail is where the senior leadership buy-in and the business leaders buy-in has not been there. So I would definitely start at holding them accountable, having those invested business leaders. And I was going to say, ask, listen, and then do, which sort of, I think, picks a little bit from all of you in terms of the strategy. Maybe it's a simplistic version, but it's like knowing your why, then asking what is needed, listening, making those notes, not assuming, not going with your biases, and then picking those 2 or 3 things, not the 20 things, the 2 or 3 things in doing that, I think, and especially for HR leaders who are solo, they need that blessing from the top, and they need a simplistic equation to work on. And totally, Alicia, on to your point on just focusing on 2 or 3 things. You want to conquer the world, you want to rule, but keeping that focus now, do focus on the small wins.
It is so painful to say that we are literally 2 minutes away from saying goodbye. And what we will have now is the wrap-up round of punchlines. And I was sitting here and thinking about something that I heard in a previous Hacking HR conversation, that organizations move with the energy of their conversations. So I was thinking, do you have a signature, powerful power questions in your conversations that really drives DEIB across your environment. So what I will do, just as we started, clockwise, and in the interest of time, I will pass the e-mic around. One question. I will give you a few seconds. In the meantime, I will just thank everybody who joined us for this past hour. It was an absolute joy and privilege to have this front row seat for your exchange. So what is your signature power question? Ngezi.
Can I go second on this? I think I need some
Yes,
inspiration.
absolutely. Sundari, are you good to go?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. I would ask leaders, how can you motivate your teams, ensure they have the authority and stay out of their way so that they can take ownership and come up with solutions?
Thank you so very much. Ngezi, good to go, or shall we move forward?
Let's keep going.
Alicia.
I would ask, is this the most important thing?
Wonderful. Jennifer.
I would ask why this matters to you.
Great question. Alenda.
I would ask, how are we putting what we've learned to work to create greater resilience for our company, especially given the times that we're in?
Wow. Ngezi.
So I'd ask, how do we make this a priority?
Wonderful. Thank you all so very much. Thank you again to everybody in the audience now or later as you will check the recording. We hope that you enjoyed this just as much as we did. Thank you, Jessa, for all your help. And I will be welcome you to more conversations in the future. Thank you. And happy World Kindness Day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.